Welcome to the Habit Chess Podcast. My name is Ms. Bahawk, and on this show, we like to talk about stacking skills and making moves. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing what I learned and my highlights from this book that I read called The Confident Mind, A Battle-Tested Guide to Unshakable Performance. It's written by Dr. Nate Zinsser. He has spent his career training the minds of the U.S. Military Academy's cadets as they prepare to lead and perform when the stakes are the very highest on the battlefield. He is the director of West Point's influential performance psychology program, and one of the things that I loved about this book is how it focused on all of the corners of confidence, right? So The Confident Mind is a complete guide to confidence, how to understand it, how to build it, how to protect it, and how to rely upon it when your performance matters most. So there are tons of great stories and examples of high-performing athletes and high-performing folks in the military, but I want to start off by sharing what made me decide to dive into this book. One, it was a short read. I was very fascinated at the thought of somebody who is in charge of military minds, studying them, training them, helping them really succeed is a side of psychology that is interesting, right? So you have sports psychology and you have people working with athletes. I felt like it was a steal to read this book because something clicked in my mind recently where I realized that, for me at least, I had a moment where something clicked for me and I was like, you know what? I cannot let my confidence be robbed by stupid things. Why is it that some days we wake up and we feel more confident and more capable than others? Why is it on some days you don't exactly feel that way? What are the things that actually contribute to that? In the past, I have known myself to tie my confidence to external achievements, things, situations, right? And that is obviously a very volatile to rely on your confidence. And your confidence is something that I feel like you need if you want to perform in any fashion, especially if you are trying to. So the book appealed to me because I was like, one, I want to know what tactics and drills and studies that have been discovered recently around this stuff, because I remember studying this stuff 10, 12 years ago where people were interested in mental toughness and mental training, but there's been even more developments since then. It's been another 10 years of research. And so I was very curious to see what Dr. Nate Zinser had to say. And to me, it felt like if you master this superpower, you unlock your true potential, right? Because there's a core theme he discusses in this book where it's preparation has a lot to do with confidence. You've probably heard that, right? If you're prepared and you've planned a lot, okay, cool, your confidence might be there. But there is a moment, and I've experienced this over the years, right, where you tend to over prepare, or now you begin to worry and you feel like when you're relaxed that, okay, I need to be worried in order to do well. I've experienced this in many different scenarios, but I was shocked to find one of the key things he highlights is worry is probably the number one killer of confidence, right? So anyways, let's dive into the first highlight here. All those thoughts interfere with, one, your perception of the situation, like the flight of the ball or the movement of the opponent or the understanding of a customer. Two, your automatic recall from your stored experiences of the proper response. And three, your unconscious instructions to your muscles and joints about how precisely to contract and relax in sequence to make the right move or the right comment at the right instant. Whether your game involves instantly reading a hostile defense and delivering a football to the right spot, returning an opponent's serve, or delivering a sales pitch to a room full of skeptical prospects, you perform more consistently at the top of your ability when you are so certain about yourself, so confident in yourself that your stream of conscious thoughts slow down to the barest minimum. So I thought this highlight did a really good job of getting across that thinking is not always the best, right? You're thinking a lot beforehand, ahead of time, so that when you actually get down to the moment, you're not thinking, right? You're able to operate in a space where there's very minimal thought that's going on, and it's all prepared actions, whether it's a physical movement or it's something that is a mental or verbal thing. I really like this section where he breaks down what does it mean really to believe in yourself. And he highlighted a couple definitions. Here are a couple typical ones. Merriam-Webster, America's most trusted online dictionary, defines confidence as a feeling or consciousness of one's powers or of reliance on one's circumstances. Cambridge Dictionary offers up this one, a feeling of having little doubt about yourself and your abilities. And then he goes on to highlight his operating definition of confidence, which is one that will actually help you perform well, is this: a sense of certainty about your ability, which allows you to bypass conscious thought and execute unconsciously. And he goes on to break down each part of that, right? So a sense of certainty is that feeling of having complete faith. And then about your ability means that you can do something or that something. And then number 3, which allows you to bypass conscious thought so well you don't have to think about it. And number 4, and execute unconsciously so you perform it automatically and instinctively. Confidence is that feeling that you can do something or that something so well you don't have to think about how to do it when you're doing it. That skill or knowledge is in you, it's part of you, and it will come out when needed if you let it. I love that last line. And it will come out when needed if you let it. This to me is really awesome because it signals that last stage of skill acquisition, right? When you have reached the autonomous stage where you don't really have to think about things anymore, right? You respond to all sorts of cues very instinctively. It almost becomes at this stage harder to describe how you even think about responding to cues. It's like thinking about how to ride a bike or how to tie your shoes. You would need a moment to think about how to articulate that because it's just been so long and you've done so many reps of it. All of the conscious deliberate thoughts take up a sizable portion of your nervous system's capacity to take in task-relevant information, process it quickly as in instantly, and send the correct response instructions back to your hands and your feet if you need to move, or your throat and tongue if you need to speak. And it goes on to talk about how this kind of disrupts performance. And I've been victim to this before, okay? I did stand-up comedy for about 4 years, and so there's a lot of preparation that you do before you go on stage, right? And then when you get on stage, you cannot be thinking too hard about some of the things or else it shows very quickly. People can feel it almost instantly, right? I find this to be true because if you are taking up a lot of bandwidth in your mind about all of these different things that you're thinking about, okay, this joke comes first, this comes after, this comes next, all of a sudden there you start to experience little things like I did where it's like, oh shoot, my throat feels like it's closing up. Oh man, my mouth is getting dry. Oh, like all these things that it feels like is out of my control. It's really happening because I'm not letting my nervous system do its thing. I'm not breathing, right? I'm overthinking. I'm really in a worried state maybe when I think that's productive and it might be helping me perform better. So the opposite is often true where it doesn't. It actually disrupts and stifles your performance in many ways. I don't know if this is from this book or if I read it somewhere else, but I remember hearing how confident is context dependent. So just because you are confident, let's say at work, does not mean that you will be confident playing pickup basketball or meeting a room full of strangers at a conference for the first time, right? So it's something that I find actually encouraging, right? Is that confidence can be developed in the frame of each context. And there are many situations and contexts that are worth being like, yeah, you know what? I'm not confident jumping out of a plane. I'm not confident in a couple environments and I'm cool with it staying that way. But the ones that I really care about, the areas that I want to perform in and actualize my potential, how can I really revive all of that confidence so that you really allow the rest of your performance to shine? Because if there's one thing you get from this book, it's the fact that no matter how talented you are, no matter how skilled you are, if you do not bring confidence to the table in pairing with it, you prevent your talent from being displayed if you do not pair the skills and everything else you've developed with confidence. Because a lack of confidence basically introduces worry, overthinking, and a couple of these points, which he goes on to mention over and over in different ways, is a killer. It's a confidence killer. And there's nothing that messes up performance more than that. And so an interesting point around this is how do you trick your brain to do that, knowing that it may not actually turn out that way, right? Like you can say to yourself, I am the best, but you also know that, okay, you're not the best. There are people out there that are objectively better than you, right? So how do you balance that sense of delusion with sense of unshakable confidence? This effect of neural networks being activated by the imagination has been cited in over 230 studies since Jacobson's original investigation. In one recent study, Kai Miller and his colleagues at the University of Washington found that when subjects imagine simple movements, such as open closing their fingers into fists, their brains' motor cortex area produced roughly 25% of the electrical activity produced during the actual movement. The implication here is that there is a very real effect of the proper use of the imagination on the execution of any movement skill, any motor skill. The boxer and the pianist, despite the differences in their respective professions, can both improve their skills by envisioning the correct execution. For example, scales and runs for the pianist, and combinations of jab, cross, uppercut, and hook for the for the boxer. The same holds true for a bunch of these different professions. I used to use this concept all the time in my weightlifting days, getting really good at the snatch and clean and jerk. I would envision myself over and over from multiple perspectives, first person, third person. And it was something that I got to talk to one of my professors at the time, who was a sports psychologist, who helped me prepare for one of my meets by giving me some cues and things like that, which really was meant to trigger your imagination, like trigger your memory of what to do when you hear that word. What do you feel? How do you react when you hear that word? And also what was cool is it's very limited to 1 to 2 words. You can't be thinking about much more than that, which I found him to cover later on here as well, which is nice. The greater level of detail you create, the greater the number of neural pathways you engage, and hence the more completely you fool your nervous system and strengthen the pathways that control successful execution. And this is going to lead into one of the points that he's going to mention later on, but it's also including some of the negative things. So what if it doesn't go well, right? How are you going to react then? Being able to envision those things in advance and in a way know that your body's going through it in some way is such a gift, right? It's like, why not expose yourself to that scenario in the comfort of your own home or room before you get in front of a bunch of people and you're going to be in the same situation. When you think about it, almost every change, every development, and every accomplishment starts out from a similar place of constructive delusion. Some idea, some mental representation that you can do something in the future or be something in the future despite never having done it or been it before, and despite having some evidence that you can't. I thought that this was so genius because it's so true. We feel like this confidence is going to just be given to us one day or emerge when we least expect it, but that really isn't the case. And many things that you start, it actually started from a place or a feeling of, I can do this. I feel like I can do this. I deserve a little more. I'm going to go after it. Despite all of your cues and maybe everything in your environment being like, no, you can't, you won't. So I thought that paragraph did a good job of pointing out, yeah, you do have to be a little delusional, but you can be actively delusional. And guess what? You have been already dozens of times throughout your life to do the things that you've done already. In many cases, started from that place of not having much evidence that you can do this thing or will do it, but you somehow convince yourself that you can, and you did. I operate from a place of delusion. I want people to walk around delusional about how great they can be, and then to fight so hard for it every day that the lie becomes the truth. And this is a quote that is from Lady Gaga. Okay, so I really like this kind of summary here. We've covered how your mental images of both future success and future defeat create a cascade of neural impulses affecting your muscular, gastrointestinal, cardiac, and immune system function. Number 2, how these impulses establish neural pathways that facilitate the repetition of desired behaviors. Number 3, how to hack into this system by deliberately using specific imagery, guidelines, the correct perspective, the incorporation of multiple senses, and the generation of genuine emotion, because the human nervous system does not distinguish real stimuli from imagined stimuli. Number 4, create and use a personal mental sanctuary, a place in the mind to safely and securely imagine successful performances in vivid detail. Number 5, how to use envisioning to establish a greater sense of certainty about your skills, your next breakthrough, and your ability to handle the flat tires that the bumpy road to success is sure to produce. I really like that summary. Now, this next highlight was actually so simple, but for whatever reason, it broke my brain and it stuck with me for days, and it had this moment that reminded me why I love reading so much, is because it's not about always hearing new ideas and new concepts. It's about hearing them sometimes in a different way, and about hearing them at the right time when your brain is receptive to it, right? And so there's this section that I read, and I remember just for the next several days, I was like, oh, like this made so much sense. It's your confidence. You worked hard to build up your mental bank account by managing your memories, telling yourself constructive stories, and envisioning your desired future. But that bank account is vulnerable. Your confidence is fragile and has to be protected. Your teammates, your coworkers, and yes, you yourself will make mistakes despite your best efforts and intentions, simply because you are human. The ongoing stream of mental chatter that your highly developed brain produces will always contain some questioning, some second guessing, and some self-criticism. But each of the attacks on your confidence presents you with a choice to either engage your safeguards or allow the world, human imperfection, or negative thinking to control your sense of certainty. So it was honestly just hearing about this concept of a mental bank account and how you've worked so hard to build it up that it doesn't make sense that somebody could come in and make a withdrawal without your permission on your behalf. So simple, but it hit my brain in such a way that I'm glad it did. Okay, the next one, the nature of confidence and the inescapable fact that the ultimate source of confidence is the way you think about yourself, your life, and the things that happen to you in your life. The need to be selective in your thinking and the process for doing so, using your human free will to mentally filter in and emphasize the thoughts and memories that build energy, optimism, and enthusiasm, while deliberately releasing or restructuring the thoughts and memories that do anything else. I love that. I love how it's talking about curating. Like, you need to, this concept of protecting your mind, right? Because without your mind, I don't feel like much, right? So doing the best that you can to be selective in your thinking and the process for doing so, right? You have a filter for what goes in, what stays, what leaves, and exercising that will, because I feel like a lot of us intuitively know we have that choice, but we don't exercise that often enough. Anyone in any job can start their day with a similar personal ritual that brings up feelings of certainty and determination. Find the best in yourself, identify the key tasks to be accomplished, and decide that you have all the knowledge and skill that is required, that you are enough. It's that simple and that difficult. What I really loved about this paragraph was coming up with a personal ritual. So that's something that guests who have come on the show have discussed, people that I have read about and talked to countless times over and over, have some version of this, right? Where they wake up and read affirmations to themselves, or they hear themselves talking really good. It's almost like you're playing a soundtrack for your brain when you wake up so that you're in sync with where you want to be for the day, versus giving someone else the opportunity to play that soundtrack for you. It's like giving somebody else the aux cord to your brain. So crafting a personal ritual, even if it's simple, it's a couple words that you say to yourself, it's proving to be worthwhile the deeper and deeper we get into this book. Oh, I love this part. I call this the statements only, or SO rule. Once a certain time has expired, or once a certain line has been crossed, you refrain from asking questions of any kind and make only statements to yourself and your teammates. This is a very interesting way of looking at it, because if you think about how questions are designed to open loops in our brain, right? And it's very useful in many cases. When you are trying to protect your confidence so that you can perform, having a bunch of questions and open loops and open tabs in your brain isn't the best thing. And so shutting that down immediately by going, you know what, everything's a statement from here on out, is a great way to go about it, and choosing when that moment is. So he goes on to mention how, hey, on game day, the moment that my feet hit the floor when I get out of bed, or the moment that I step onto the field, right? So for whichever situations you're using this in, you can have a specific guideline for yourself. Once this moment happens, I'm following the SO rule, statements only. And then, you know what, the questions and open tabs can be opened back up later after period you're trying to protect has actually passed. I often get the question, what if I know deep down that I haven't done what I should have done to prepare, but I have to go in and take that test anyway? Answer, go in and take the test with the same 100% conviction that you'd have if you'd been the last one to leave the library every night for the last week. And he goes on to mention how you really can't know what you're capable of until you empty the tank. And you factually will not be able to empty the tank when there is a lot of overthinking and worry going on. I found that interesting because you're not really giving yourself a fair shot. The mental techniques of treating each imperfect moment of your performance as 1, a temporary just that one time occurrence, 2, a limited just in that one place occurrence, and 3, a non-representative, that's not me occurrence, will prevent you from sliding into the worrisome, here I go again trap, the doubtful I'm messing this whole thing up vibe, and the debilitating I stink state. I thought this was wildly useful because it's like temporary, limited, and non-representative. These are the tools to use to protect your confidence, right? Because there will be errors and bumps along the road, and this is where you can visualize them ahead of time, right? But you can also have a process for dealing with it when it comes up. Hey, when something does go wrong and I'm trying to protect that confidence so that I can really finish out the performance, it's like in the middle of a speech, if you messed up, you can't go down the rabbit hole of overthinking that too much, or else you're not going to be able to finish the rest of your speech. And so in that moment when you need to quickly settle in again, a temporary, just that one time occurrence, a limited occurrence, it's just this one place, it's not going to happen again, and that wasn't me, I don't know what happened there, let's move on. I love these 3 formal ways to disengage those senses. You internally know you can maybe do that, but until I heard it in that way, temporary, limited, and non-representative, it didn't really click for me, because we've all been there when you experience that one error that triggers all of those other worries, right? You're like, whoa, this is happening again. It's sending you down a path of worry that is hard to get out of. And we're all susceptible to that. But having kind of these 3 frameworks is a quick way to put out the fire before it gets too big. An effective pre-shot routine accomplishes something very important. It stops you from thinking about the past and the future and puts you right into the present moment, taking you away from overanalysis, needless judgment, and dangerous self-criticism into immediate sensory engagement with what's important now. By taking your attention away from all those intruding thoughts and worries, the right pre-shot routine lets your confidence, your personal sense of certainty shine through so you can execute without all those thoughts and worries eating up precious mental bandwidth and precious mental energy. I really like the idea of a pre-shot routine because I was a big fan of warm-ups when I was in fitness coaching and when I was competing as well. It would be something that I knew was so important to how you would perform that I really researched that stuff. I really made sure to tailor that for a lot of my clients. And that is a perfect opportunity during those warm-ups to begin to bridge this kind of routine in which you begin to go from, all right, I'm warming up, I'm tight, all right, crack, boom, snap. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, cool. Let's now execute without thought. This is now training me to now be in that performance zone. I've now gone from warm-up to actually performing. Even the idea of coming up with one and, you can lose your mind and come to your senses before each moment of engagement in your performance by following this 3-step CBA pre-shot routine. Number 1 is cue your conviction. Number 2 is breathe your body. And number 3 for A, attach your attention. The first one, the use of cue words is a well-established practice in sports psychology, and they have been shown to an effective device for controlling one's attention, controlling one's mood or affect, and as we discuss in chapter 3, enabling consistent effort. So this was similar to that story I just told you about Olympic weightlifting and preparing for that meet, is coming up with keywords to signal. Okay, next, the research suggests that your pre-shot or pre-engagement routine should begin with a short, powerful statement. Short because you are now in the arena and may not have much time. Powerful because the moment calls for the best version of yourself. And a statement because this is game day, and on game day, you follow the statements only rule. And if it's helpful, I'll read If it's helpful, I'll read some examples that are here from his clients. This is what I do, ! From an NHL player. Be a wall, ! It's from a NCAA lacrosse goalie. Ease and fire, ! It's an NFL player. Do it like you know it, Super Bowl MVP. Open it up, NCAA soccer player. Here's my chance, investment advisor. I've done the work, Army combat diver candidate, and many more. Any statement that brings up or reinforces your resolve to do well will work here. So I really like that CBA concept. It's worth taking the time to develop your own for specific performance situations. And I really like how the cueing your conviction can be so short. It can be 3 words. It can be a statement that might sound cheesy to other people, but it really matters what it sounds like to you, because you're not going to be saying this out loud or to other people. It's about how deeply it resonates with you, because the more it resonates, the more effective it will be in cueing your conviction. You never want to think, man, this is what I've worked so hard for, because that puts all of your focus on the end result when you need to be totally focused on the process of success. This was a game changer, right? Because how many times does that happen? Man, this is what I've worked so hard for. It feels like something that is productive to be reminding yourself of all that's on the line, everything that you've put in. But in many cases, it is the exact opposite, right? It's opening up the door to just totally shifting away your focus, beginning to trigger the other 2 things we talked about, worry and overthinking. And likely all of these things we just read about today might even evaporate in the moment once you begin to utter these words. So this line was from Michael Phelps. He gave a great explanation of why this difference matters. You never want to think, man, this is what I've worked so hard for, because that puts all of your focus on the end result when you need to be totally focused on the process of success. And it goes on to be a very long story or paragraph laugh, but it's basically the idea of not letting yourself go down that rabbit hole because it seems productive kind of in the moment. Oh man, I'm reminding myself of how important this all is, right? But often it's distracting from the very small, minute detail that's in front of you that needs a little more focus. It's often just distracting from the minute detail that's in front of you that demands your focus, or at the very least, just to be dealt with in the first place. Well, I really like this part. Looking for your slightest break as part of any mental preparation and mental toughness training. Looking for that slightest break is an element of the A in any CBA pre-engagement routine. It plays a useful role in two important ways. First, looking for your slightest break means by definition that your attention is focused and that you are into your senses and scanning your world for anything that might be helpful. Second, looking for the slightest break means that you are acting from a certain degree of certainty that there is indeed a break out there that you can use to your advantage once you find it. Think about that. You wouldn't be looking for something if you knew that it didn't exist or couldn't possibly be found. I really like this because remember, the A in CBA is attaching your attention. And so when you're looking for something that's even slightly positive to your advantage that you can attach your attention to, that is way more encouraging way to give yourself momentum than to be looking for things that are going wrong, because that's also common. It sounds funny when you say it, but it's no, you are looking for errors to avoid. And that can be a way of tackling it, like playing defense that way, right? Or looking for slightest breaks is offense to me, right? It's like you're looking for the good thing that you can attach onto and ride its wave to the finish versus looking for the one thing that go wrong. And then of course, there's a chance that you prevent it, but there's also a chance that it throws you off your game even more. Pressure indeed makes diamonds, but once that diamond is made and it's time for that diamond to shine, you handle it very carefully and put it in a setting where its beauty can be seen. You certainly won't squeeze it any further. It's as beautiful as it will ever be, so leave it alone and just let it shine. This is really important because he goes on in the next line to talk about how you don't want to be tired and stuff when it's time to perform. Sometimes it feels like training really hard is the way to prepare for something really hard. And in weightlifting and other competitive sports where I got to train people and compete myself, there's something known as a deload week, right? It's something where as you're coming to a big performance state, you want to make sure that you give yourself a couple of days minimum to at least a week or 2 weeks where your nervous system is beginning to repair. It's beginning to be in its best shape where, yes, it might be helpful to expose myself to some really heavy lifts on the Monday before the meet. But guess what? If I'm training like it's day one, week one of a cycle, I'm super excited, I'm going to burn myself out by the time I get to the meet. I'm not going to have any strength left by the time my name is called. So I really like this idea of the work is done. Okay, you've done all the work that can be done and it's time to now perform. And having a finite amount of that and then consciously knowing that the way that you will prepare for strenuous effort. So anyways, I thought that was useful. The more your performance matters, the more important it is for you to free yourself from worry, doubt, fear, and anything else that might interfere with the delivery of the best you've got. That's when you really have to step back from thinking about the outcome and the consequences of your performance, because the more you focus on them, the more your attention will be divided and the more your power in the moment will be diminished. And this is so true. This is like the more you care about something, the more you want to be extra prepared. You want to plan even more. You want to look over your notes another 10 times right before you go up, right? But it's recognizing that you're doing that, one, because you obviously care about your performance in this situation. But I like this way of rewiring it where it's like the more you care, the more important it is of being able to go, you know what? We got to go the opposite. We got to figure out a way to almost not care momentarily to some extent. But instead of saying it like that, don't care, right? I like how he worded it. Free yourself from worry, doubt, fear, and anything else that might interfere with the delivery of the best you've got. This was a quote at the opening of chapter 9 that I really liked. In the journey of 1,000 miles, 900 miles is only halfway. And that's a quote from Tsutomu Oshima. That really resonated with me because I've been in so many competitive scenarios where it's like I crushed it for 97%. And then it's like the last 10 seconds, the last minute is where I lose it all or I screw it all up. And so it just spoke to me there to go, yep, that's relatable. What is called in military military speak, an AR or after action review. Until you've conducted a personal AAR and learned everything there is to be learned from the game you just played, the concert you just gave, and the workday you just completed, that game, concert, or workday really isn't over. An effective AAR proceeds through 3 steps organized around 3 questions. Number 1, what? As in, what actually happened in the performance? Number 2, so what? As in, what can you conclude from what happened? And number 3, now what? As in, now that you've drawn your conclusions from what happened, what are you going to keep doing, start doing, or stop doing to ensure your next great performance? I really like this because he goes on, it can be tempting to overlook this, to rush it, but it is so crucial to take this time because this is where a lot of things you can consciously ingrain, right? All these things you're trying to subconsciously soak in like a sponge. There is a moment where you can consciously let that seep in. So this after action review, I like that. So my last quote here is from the epilogue, the last few lines before the acknowledgments begin. It's a quote from Sun Tzu from The Art of War. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. And it goes, what kind of warrior will you be? The choice is up to you. So I hope this was as fun and useful for you as it was for me. I really learned a lot in this book and it came at just the right moment. So I wanted to make sure to read through it and cover it as quick as I can because I feel like it's an essential piece to any goal that you might be chasing. It is absolutely essential to skill acquisition and to skill stacking. So make sure to check out the full book if you enjoyed this episode. The link is in the description below. And of course, if you have a moment, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple or Spotify. That is always greatly appreciated and goes a long way. I appreciate you hanging out and taking the time, and I will see you on the next one.